It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tupper, one of our Smart Life members in this international collaboration. So Seda is from Exeter University. She's a Senior Impact and Partnership Development Manager with specialist expertise in international research program management. She specializes in interdisciplinary and multi-partner institutional bids. This involves international projects in countries such as Brazil, China, Indonesia, and India. She also has a PhD in disaster resilience and vulnerabilities in the context of aging. So it's with a great pleasure I can hand over to Seda for the next presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle, and what a flattering introduction. I'm not quite sure I've had one like that before, so thank you. Well, it's a great privilege to be here to talk to you all about equitable partnerships, a really important concept in the context of designing and delivering research. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm Sarah Tupper, based at the University of Exeter in the southwest of England. And my talk today will provide some sort of scene setting on equitable partnerships, thinking about what do equitable partnerships mean, why are they important, and how can equitable partnerships be demonstrated in research applications. I understand Barbara, who will follow, will talk more about the practicalities of setting up and delivering equitable partnerships. So hopefully both these presentations combined will provide a really good insight into thinking about equitable partnerships in the context of doing research. As with all of these things, my experience and knowledge is situated, so I will be coming at this from a bit of a UK lens, but it'll be interesting to see if these sort of principles and what I'm talking about is relevant across all the contexts we have here, including the African context. Let's just go to my next slide. So my presentation will cover a bit more about the context of equitable partnerships, thinking about what are the key principles when talking about equitable partnerships, thinking more about the research funding requirements, which often drive how we demonstrate and do equitable partnerships, sometimes being a bit of a barrier as well. Thinking about then I'll talk about how equitable partnerships can be demonstrated in research applications, using both good and not so good examples. And then I will conclude with providing some reflections from my experience of what I think about equitable partnerships. So as Michelle just mentioned, so I've got 5 years of experience of working in the research and innovation sector at the University of Exeter, doing a bit of research management, but also research project delivery as well. So I have experience of running sort of international research programs, such as the GCR Global Challenges Research Fund, Newton Fund, and a government-funded, UK government-funded international climate finance program. So as Michelle mentioned, experience of delivering projects across a range of different countries, including Brazil, China, India, and Indonesia. So through all of this, I've got a genuine interest in sort of global challenges, how they apply across different contexts, how interdisciplinary research projects work together, and thinking about the value around sort of international partnerships. So if we were to do a word cloud on what we mean by partnerships, I suspect we'll get a response or an image which looks a little bit like this. So the associations of partnerships are generally seen to be positive in that they mean a sharing of expertise and knowledge, which results in the generation of innovative ideas and solutions, and partnerships working across interdisciplinary boundaries, working with lots of different disciplines and across different geographical regions, are generally seen as really valuable for fostering innovative outcomes and maximising opportunities for impact. So by doing all this partnership work, it means a generation of new skills and opportunities for everyone that's involved in those partnerships. So what do we mean by equitable partnerships? Well, there's no commonly agreed definition as to what constitutes equitable partnerships, but research by ESPA has pointed to 3 dimensions that can be a factor in thinking about equitable partnerships. So the first one to talk about is recognition. So thinking about what voices are heard in the designing, planning and implementation of research projects, and how are differing partner priorities and requirements factored into this. The second dimension is procedure. Are there appropriate processes in place to facilitate the management of the research projects? And are these clear, and does everyone have a voice in designing and developing and implementing these processes? The third dimension is distribution. Is the research effort and resources equitably distributed? And are the expected benefits of the partnership in terms of outputs, journal publications, etc., are they also fairly distributed and weighted appropriately across the partnership? So thinking about all these dimensions are helpful to thinking about, is a partnership equitable? And the role of research managers and administrators are really important in terms of thinking about all these factors here and ensuring that equitable partnerships are considered across different dimensions and at all stages. So why are we talking about equitable partnerships? So there's a variety of reasons why equitable research partnerships are at the forefront of our thinking at the moment. I've picked out 3 that I feel are the primary drivers around equitable partnerships. And the first is this divide now between research academics and international non-governmental organisations, NGOs, really kind of working together collaboratively across different sectors to identify and find solutions for development challenges. The second, and related to this, is that we are very much living in an impact and challenge-led era, so defined and shaped by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which themselves are complex, requiring interdisciplinary approaches, international teams to tackle these. So again, partnerships being thread throughout all of these. And then the third is that research funding is really driving the requirements for partnerships, and therefore good partnerships need to be equitable. And these research funding, particularly in the UK, some of you may have heard of the Global Challenges Research Fund, Newton Fund, Darwin Initiative. So this is research funding that's been funded through the UK aid budget that is meant to be designed to support research that addresses the challenges facing the developing countries. And to do that, international partnerships are integral to that. So there's a lot of background research on resources on equitable research partnerships, which will be shared at the end of this session to participants. And there's a lot of thinking around what are the principles of equitable research partnership. So the Rethinking Research Collaborative here has identified 8 principles in terms of thinking about equitable research partnerships. I won't go into these in detail, and I encourage you to explore further if you are interested. But generally, it's really thinking about, are the challenges associated with poverty alleviation, for example, at the centre of the research, and do they remain the case throughout? Thinking critically about the context in which research is operating in, the relationships that are involved in that, and how a project can be agile to change as it kind of develops and goes on. And then thinking about the values around trust, respect, mutual respect as well, to kind of really ensure that knowledge and skills are kind of taken forward, and that the relationships are kind of built on really good values that will serve the sustainable partnership in the future. And the idea is that these partnerships, they're not just fixed, they are growing, and you continue to learn from each other, and the partnership will continue to grow as well. So really thinking about the principles behind equitable partnerships and really critically engaging with the matter. So I touched upon a little bit about the research funding. So in the UK, we're seeing more and more this explicit requirement around equitable partnerships, which need to be demonstrated in research applications, and that is integral to ensuring not only a successful research project. So this basically requires a demonstration of the breadth of the teams involved, but also making sure that the resources and budget, for example, is appropriately justified and in relation to the equitable partnerships. So it's balanced accordingly to that. So by having equitable partnerships within the context of research funding really drives research teams to think about what their projects look like in terms of equitable partnerships, acknowledging actually that funding themselves, the way they're designed, can sometimes be a bit of a barrier in terms of the partnerships itself, but I can talk a bit more about that in the discussion perhaps. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the contexts I've been working in. So at the University of Exeter, we have been running an internal research funding scheme, and the aim of this internal funding scheme is to support challenge-led research projects that align with ensuring ODA principles of kind of promoting social and economic well-being, and supporting and facilitating international partnerships. And it was integral for us as designing the programme and the funding scheme that we embedded equitable partnership within all stages of the application and review process. So a screenshot here shows you just a snapshot that reviewers were required to really make it respond to the question of equitable partnership in the context of that application and give it a score of 1 to 5. So making sure that partnerships were weighted in the context of the overall research. So the first example we'll just talk about is a project that looks to understand how refugee crisis is unfolding in Turkey and Jordan, and then thinking about what sort of means and methods can be employed to promote peace, justice, and humanitarian action. So a really important research project, excellent team involved, great sort of timeline of activities, a series of workshops, a series of kind of clearly designed outputs, and field visits to relevant sites, working with NGOs as well. So really good interdisciplinary project. However, despite this, it didn't receive a particularly good score in relation to the partnership. So this reviewer said the project clearly demonstrated the potential for equitable partnership, but it didn't do enough. So the research project seemed to be designed around an exclusive set of pre-existing partners, which were perhaps a bit more privileged within the research space. And that actually what the proposal could have done was demonstrate more inclusive outcomes and inclusive project overall, to think about how the network could expand and make opportunities available to other scholars and practitioners. So as this, to quote this reviewer, as to not compound existing inequalities of access and exposure. So this project didn't end up get funded. It's a competitive scheme, and if equitable partnerships aren't justified, then that just brings down the application. And then the second application B is a project that looks to understand the roles of women in the context of agroforestry systems in Brazil. And this project worked very closely with an organisation based in centre of Brazil, and was designed to outreach to different women's networks and communities within the area. This project had the benefit of building on extensive expertise and also track record of working with these partners. There's reference to a previous application here. And throughout, the reviewer picked up on that this application really demonstrated an equitable approach in its structure and in its planned activity. So going back to thinking about those components of equitable partnerships, that actually thinking about equitable partnerships in between each of the think about equitable partnerships across all of the activities. So this project had the benefit of having pre-existing partnerships built on existing funding, but this played a significant strength in being awarded further funding through our scheme as well, as it was really able to demonstrate that equitable partnerships throughout. So if I'm to conclude, this very whistle-stop tour on what our equitable research partnerships, and there's an awful lot out there on there, so really if you are interested, a lot to process, but essentially they are important in ensuring kind of delivery of high quality research, innovative solutions, impact, sharing of knowledge, skills, expertise, so really need to be taken seriously. But equitable partnerships do take time, so it's a matter of years and years in some cases, because of sometimes the different obstacles involved in kind of facilitating and learning how partnerships work, and building up that mutual trust inevitably will take time. So it's important to start small, if possible, before expanding at a larger scale in terms of research projects. And then thinking about how the broader context in which those partners are situated, how are they interacting with regional, national and global knowledge systems? And then research managers and administrators, a lot of equitable partnership work really focuses on those doing the research, less so on those supporting the design and delivery of the research. And actually, we all have an important role to play in acknowledging, understanding and implementing partnership work. And I can talk about it later on perhaps, but funding structures and the way they're designed can both help promote and encourage equitable partnerships, but actually due to maybe more bureaucratic mechanisms can be a hindrance as well. So just thinking it's not a perfect world in which we operate. I can take questions, discussions and comments at the end or when prompted by members of the organising team. So thank you very much.